Hi and welcome to this demo. Today we're going to show you how you can establish identity assurance for AWS administration over PowerShell. First, the reason we're doing this is because identity assurance is the first step towards a more mature identity and access practice. And it's basically about making sure that the people who interact with our systems are who they say they are. In the previous demo, you showed me that I was able to show identity assurance using access to AWS prompted for multi-factor authentication. For example, if the user needs access, they're going to get prompted for multi-factor authentication, and they need to satisfy this before they are able to get role-based access into AWS. For example, in this case, I'm logged in as an EC2 admin, and I'm trying to see things in identity and access management, therefore I don't get access to it. So what we have accomplished here is centralized identity, right? This could be a user from AD, LDAP, Google Directory, etc. We've also achieved SSO, but we also have achieved role-based access control, right? So ultimately what we want to do is combine controls to make sure that we're providing defense in depth, but in the case of protecting credentials. Now let's look at our example. So what is it typically what people do when they want to do administration in AWS, right? So for example, I'm going to just do this command, EC2 instance, right? It's a very common command. Most of the time what you're going to see is that these commands allow you to provide basically two parameters, an access key and a secret key, right? So, but what is the problem around this, right? That these could potentially be shared credentials. So we're not only creating a new identity source with these keys, right? The same way you do with SSH keys, but we're also eliminating the opportunity for us to know who, if the person who's using this access and secret key is who they say they are. So what we want to do is make sure that we provide a consistent experience to the end user. They can do what they're supposed to do, and they can quickly do that. So what I've done here is I've set up my region. If I were to run this command, if I go and do, for example, echo the me variable, there's nothing in it. So this command will fail. But if I go ahead and I authenticate first with Centrify, and these are plugins that are provided with the SAML application with that Centrify provides, and also there's Python examples as well. So all I need to do is authenticate. And by the way, I have a authentication profile that first will challenge the user for a particular additional factor. For example, I'm going to use here actually SMS. So I have my phone with me, and we're going to show it on the screen. So notice that it's asking me for a code that was sent over SMS, right? So let me go ahead and show this over AirPlay. Once this is shown here, I got this code. All I need to do is click on it. I could type it and go old school, but I can just approve it here. And what's going to happen is that the REST API did all the work for me. So all I need to do is press OK. Now notice that my identity has been established because I have my phone. But now notice that it's asking me for my password. Doing this sequence allows us to make sure that there's no denial of service attacks against the user credential. Now I get to pick the role, right? So in this case, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do EC2 admins, right? So once I pick my role, now I am going to get a token. So if I were to, for example, echo the me variable again, notice that I'm going to have a token, and this token, it has an expiration, right? So it still functions the same way, but it uses temporary access controls. So now if I wanted to go and run this command, and I don't have many instances in there, but I'm hoping to get something back. So the idea here is that now I can perform the administration that I'm supposed to do. Now, for example, this example here is talking about S3 buckets, but I am a different type of administrator. So if I wanted to, for example, go and get an S3 bucket, so get S3 bucket, and with credential me, My expectation is that this static command will fail because this user doesn't have any access to an S3 bucket. So ultimately what we want to do is continue to provide the same experience, but also enforce the role-based access controls that we have in place, right? Notice that I get the access denied. But finally, what I wanted to show is the whole thing with consistency. Centrify is uniquely positioned to give your users the same experience across the board. For example, if I were to use the same user in the case of Unix, and I'm doing privilege elevation, right? Notice that the factors are going to be consistent across the board. In this case, what I did was I ran dcdo-root, right? My expectation here is that the mechanisms are the same. Same thing if I were to, for example, if I have a system and I ask for multi-factor authentication at login. So my expectation is that's going to be the same. Same thing for Windows, right? So when you are accessing a Windows server, you want to make sure that, and let's just do this here. What's going to happen here is, notice the reverse authentication profile. I'm being asked for my password first, then I'm going to have to satisfy multi-factor authentication requirements, right? If I were to do this, for example, on Windows, and let me just go ahead and do that, and I wanted to RDP into this machine, I'm just going to pick Diana again, right? So the experience is going to be consistent across the board. Notice that the mechanisms are the same. Here we have privilege elevation on Unix. We have access on Unix. Over here, when I click here, it's going to be the same on Windows, right? So the methods are going to be exactly the same for that same user. And we already did that as well when we opened a console, for example. Methods were exactly the same across the board. So this consistency, right? Centrify is uniquely positioned to provide that consistency. And it's very different than when you have multiple solutions across the board. Ultimately, as a security practitioner, we also want to make sure that we balance usability with security, and Centrify is uniquely positioned to do that. So to recap, we need to provide identity assurance. People must prove that they are who they are. We can do this in AWS with the console. We can do it with PowerShell. We can do it with Python, and it's consistent with what we've been doing with Unix, with access and privilege elevation, and with Windows with access and privilege elevation as well. We can do this with VPNs too, and we can support legacy tokens via Radius.